Good morning, everyone, I guess some of you may be good evening and good afternoon. My name is Jason Epstein, and I am one of the product managers for Ranorex. I'll be doing some of the hosting for today's session. Our topic today is how to accelerate your testing with the Ranorex API. The presenter today, who is our resident expert, is Mubin Kadiwala. He will be presenting a demonstration of the API and how that's used. A few housekeeping items here is we will be using the Q&A panel, and it's usually in the upper right corner. And just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded. Our agenda. So we're going to Mubin's going to explain what is an API, and we're going to find and have different ways of finding API methods and classes in the Ranorex API documentation. We're going to be accessing the Ranorex API in a code module. We're going to be using repository objects and converting actions into methods, and then he'll have some examples on how all that works together. So, all right. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Mubin.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Mubin. I'm an engineer with Ranorex, and today we're going to look at the Ranorex API. Before doing so, let's just quickly go over the acronym API. A is for application, and that's software that does a task. Ranorex Studio is the software, and the task is to create automated tests. P is programming, and programs do the task in the application. Ranorex has several programs, one for creating reports, another for managing test cases, the action table, managing the repository. So it has a collection of programs that we can interact with through the API. And then finally, we have the interface, and the interface is just a place where we can access these programs. And in our case, it'll be using code. What makes an API great? The API just uses the program. We don't have to write any code to do any automation. Ranorex Studio has the API for the automation, so no need to write it. Many APIs are platform independent, and APIs are upgrade safe. In the case of Ranorex, you can use its APIs in other studios like Visual Studios or any other .NET Studio. However, if the Studio version changes from 3, 4, 5, 6, the API will still remain the same, and interacting with the API doesn't change. So the API is not linked to upgraded packages or upgraded tools that interact with the API. In this webinar, I guess before I start, the webinar itself is one direction. All I can really do is present the webinar. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat panel. Our Q&A team will be happy to answer them. However, if you can, try to keep it to this topic, Ranorex API. I know they get a lot of questions, and it's hard always to respond to each and every one. So if we can keep it to Ranorex API, that would be great. So in this presentation, we are going to recreate this test that I created over here using the click and go approach. Mouse and keyboard, all actions were recorded. Ranorex created an action table and built the test for me. So we're going to take this and rebuild it using code, using access in the API. We're going to start by looking at it at the very high level, creating a very basic API interaction, and then work our way down until we have a very robust test case and ways to interact with it. Before we do that, let's look at in the Help menu item inside Ranorex Studio, go to API Documentation. It'll give you a list of everything in here that what you can find out about the Ranorex APIs, either through the index, just click on an item of interest and read more about it, or go to the search and type like button. That'll give you a list of things about the button, the mobile UI class, the adapter class, button methods, or button class. If you double click it, it'll then expose all the actions this class can do. The pressed action, enable the button if it's disabled. So many of this you can do the click approach is what we'll look at. We won't interact with every one, but here you can read more about the different methods provided for this class and overload methods as well. I'll focus on click, but you can set a click duration if you want, a location of where the click will happen. So quite a lot that you can do through the API that you otherwise couldn't do just through the studio itself. Okay, so let's create a new recording module. I'll click this button right here. We'll call it the API version 1. And I'm going to create a new user code. I'll call this simply API v1. Let's double click and start creating some actions in code. To get the objects into the code module, go ahead and do your application under test, which is going to be our demo app. Open up SPY and let's track the objects of interest. So I want to wait for SPY to interact. Click on the test database tab. This is the object we're going to interact with. Just click, drag, and hold, or click, hold, and drag using the left mouse button into your code. Release, and there you have it. A tab page object called test database, and the path to the object on the process tree, your operating system's process tree. This is the path to that object. Okay. Once I have it, I can just type it out. We'll get IntelliSense will pop up, allowing us to quickly get what we want. In this case, it's the task database, and we're going to do the click action. Okay. Once I have that, I'll go back to my SPY and my application, track, and this time we'll track first name. Here we have it. We'll do the same thing. And for first name, we can click and also type into it. So we'll do first name. There we go. So 3 lines of code. I had to call the object, then click, and then type into it. Now, as you're doing this, you probably realize that the first name is targeting both the click and the press event. So I probably don't really need click if I'm not really testing the user interface. I just want to interact and type in values into each text box. I can comment that out if I want and just do directly go into the press keys. But I'm going to mimic this like I did for this test here. I'm just going to mimic this test here. Okay, let's go back and do this again. We'll track the last name object. And you can see as I'm doing this more and more, click, drag, and hold. Okay, this doesn't seem to want to grab it. There we go. Okay, I'm sure by now everybody knows what that last part was going to be. Batman, my superhero. But you can see how tedious it is creating your Ranorex test using the direct API. Let's go ahead and just try to finish this off really quickly. Where's my SPY track? I'm going to click the drop-down button. Go ahead and interact, put it right here. Okay, let me just go ahead and get all my objects at once so I don't have to write all my code and grab and write code. We will track. Okay, this time I want to get the menu inside of the department when I click this drop-down button. So I'm going to press F12. That disables SPY, so I can interact now with my application. We'll expose the menu and click development. Okay, do the same thing, click drag, drop. Let's go ahead and do this now for gender. Actually, we'll do it for age because I need to double click this and then add age. Okay, let me go ahead and do the double click, or I'll just add my values here real quick. Up, down. Now, Ranorex selected up, down, edit as a variable name, but you can always change that if you like. And this is going to be the double click event. Okay, and then we're going to do it one more time. And as you can see, as I'm typing the IntelliSense, what we looked at in the API itself, all the possible items that you can interact with for this object. So they're all listed here. Go ahead and read the API for more details. For now, we're just going to focus on press keys, put in an age. Okay. We'll do the same thing for here, just a quick click. Oh, not list item, but development. Okay, this one, same thing. Open dot click. And then finally, let's just finish it off. But you can see how tedious it is to have to write this in code. Remember, Ranorex has been around for about 13, 14 years. So its code is true and tested. It knows how to create these actions and create them quickly and effectively. We shouldn't have to go in and try to redo everything Ranorex already knows how to do and create it ourselves again. So ideally, using that click and drag approach or click and go approach to build the test, and then later we can interact with the code as needed. Let me go ahead and click, what do I want to do? This and spy. Yeah, I think I did up and down. Now I just need to click on gender and then add entry. Oops. Go back to spy. Oh, didn't I just do up and down? See, as you start doing this more, it's really a time sink in trying to remember what you did and how you need to do it. Okay, so I grabbed the wrong one last time. Perfect. Oops, still grabbing the same one. I wonder why that is. Let's go back and try it one more time. If I'm not successful, you can also right click and add to repository and drag it in that way, but let's try this as the button I want. There we go, got the button. Okay, RDB dot click. Then we'll go back and we need to add all of this to the table. So I'm going to click on add entry. Okay, let me go ahead and hit F12. Let's just bring it in focus. There we go. And grab and drop. Perfect. Now using the coded approach, getting the objects this way, it means I have to now go back and create all of these steps that I put into code. I need to go back and add it all here. So bat, man, department was the first one, 42, male, add entry, and then finally I'll click that, I'll validate, and we'll hit delete entry. Let's go back to spy, track. I'm gonna validate first. There we go. Okay, and then I'm gonna grab this, put it right there, and I want to validate, but this time, the LBD number is the object we're gonna validate. So we'll start off by typing validate, and we're gonna target an attribute of this object. So we'll click attribute. Now we have 16 different overloads for this method. We're really just going to target that first one where it's going to be string name and object value. So string name will be the attribute we want to target, and object value will be the value that attribute holds. So first is our item info, our repo item info, and that is label number of persons, comma, text attribute has the value 1. Okay, and that's it, colon, and then we'll end with a delete and exit. So open up spy, open up this guy, track, and add. This is the Batman dot click. And then finally, we'll end it with one last action. Track, delete. Okay, put it here. We'll go back here. We'll actually delete it and clear it out. Dot click. Okay, there I have it. My whole test, which would have taken me about 30 seconds to create using the click and go approach, took me about, feels like 10 minutes doing the actions this way. Now these are just the actions. In the final report, you won't really see details of the success. Remember Ranorex Studio, if I go back to the test recording, the one I did with the click and go approach, if I right click any of these actions and say view code, you can see Ranorex already created these actions for me in code behind the scenes. And we'll look at this in version 2, the repo item here and targeting it directly. But in our case, we had to create the object and then do the action. But we didn't create any report event. So the final report will not look in any way like the Ranorex generator report with details of each action and how it was executed. So let's go ahead and just run it really quickly. Oops, look at that, I already have an error, so I need to fix my code. Again, if it was true and tested, using letting Ranorex write all of the code accessing the API, save you the trouble of having to debug it later after you wrote your own code. Still have errors. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm going to fix this one more, and if anybody else sees an error, go ahead and shout out the equals. I didn't need that. I don't know how I typed that. That was supposed to be a comma. And this time we're just going to build it and not execute. There we go, perfect. So let's go ahead and run this code. And we'll look at the report after it finishes. Remember, our Q&A team is happy to take questions, but if you can limit it to just the Ranorex API, that would be appreciated. Okay. Now the coded action targeting the API is just as fast as the Ranorex approach. And here we have the report, just one line item that it was successful. We don't know what happened at any point above it or below it, the time reference to every action, what that action was. So if you're going to do it using the API, you will then have to target the Ranorex report API and add a reporting step if you wanted to, you could go report dot log, what report levels. Every action is just informational. Is it a success, failure? Is it, so we have about 6 different report type properties. But again, it's an overload. You want just a report level in string, like report level info. I just want info that says this was a mouse action. Okay. And there we have it. So now it's a lot of code that you have to then go back and remember to add all your report actions. Now that we have this, let's look at version 2 and then version 3. We won't go through the whole step of recreating all of this, so it's very time consuming, but we'll quickly look at how we can create a better version of this. As you notice from the beginning, this version has the path defined in the recording. So this, if you use this path again in other recordings and you have to edit it later for development purposes, the developers have changed the path of the object and it needs to be updated, you will have to update it everywhere it's being used. So that's you really tax managing these tests by having objects that are used in many places locally instead of globally. That's what the repository is. The repository right here is a global collection of objects that can be used in any recording. So if you have to make an update, just update it once here. Anywhere they're shared or linked, referenced, will reflect that update. So let's make a second recording that's where we target the repository objects. So we'll go and we'll create API version 2. Okay, and again, we'll create a new recording module. We'll call this API v2. Oops. Nice thing about this is you can always edit your method. Once you create it, you're not stuck using that name. I'm going to double click. And now I want to use those repository objects. So I can go back to my recording, expand my, actually I want to delete these. We'll come back to those guys later. Okay, and object. So I want to click my test database tab. Remember, when you click repository item, it gives you a picture of that item. So click, drag, and hold. It's a staple in Ranorex. Take it to the user code and put it right here. So now I have a variable that's targeting a repo item test database. Test database dot click. Okay, we'll go back, do it again. This time, once we have it, we'll go to first name, drag, put it right here. First name dot click. First name dot press keys. And bat. But you see the process all over again. We have to take these objects, drag them to the action table. We have to then add a report step and rebuild this again and again. The only real difference, the big difference, is we're targeting the repo item this time. So in a sense, rather than grabbing the item from SPY and dropping it into the code, you can grab the item from SPY this way. Let's just say I'm going to pick the label color, and you can drag it directly into the repository. Once you have it in the repository, you can then add it to the action table. There's a second way of adding the objects to the user code rather than dragging and dropping. If you understand the layout of how it's built, so this is a repository, as you can see right here in the Ranorex Project Explorer. So this is a repo. This right here is the repo. It's the parent is the repository. This is the second level. This is the process that we're targeting. And then these are the third level, which is the object. Some might have a rooted folder, so it might be a third level and a fourth level. But really, I don't think we go deeper than 4 levels. So that path we can build inside user code. And you don't have to save it to a variable. We can access the actions directly. We'll call it repo. You can see it pops up .rx mainframe because that was the parent. Once you have that and you click dot, we're only going to see the properties belonging to the parent and all the things it can do. Okay, there's no click event because you can't really click on the parent itself. So we're going to go a layer deeper, which is the Rx tab, and then last name dot click. Okay. And then once you have it, rather than typing it again, you can just select and paste. Go back, dot, press, oops, not that one. And again, the semicolon because I am not paying attention. And then man. Okay, but still a lot of extra work. However, you can still, it's a lot easier than having to drag it directly from the SPI and then dealing with a fixed path. Now, if I need to change again a path in the repository, it's reflected in every recording. So repo.rx mainframe and first name, last name, I think age is probably in there as well. So Rx tab, and I think it's up and down. Yep, up and down edit dot click. And then we'll do it just one more and then we'll move on to version 3. Dot press keys. Okay, so there we have it. We have 2 versions so far that we looked at. You can work with the path directly. Not a good idea because if you have the same path in multiple recordings, you'll have to go back and if edit ever needs to happen, you'll have to edit in every place it's being used. The repository item is better if you use these actions in code in other places, Ranorex Studio. I believe if you go back here, you can right click on an object like the first name object and say find code references everywhere it's being used and click on it or all code references, or I'll just say user code references. And it'll tell me in this user code, this v2 class, I'm using it on line 57 or X is 57, line 41. If I had it in multiple recordings, I can select it and say all code references. So I am using it in a few other places. So you can see this repository item used in other recording modules. So it's a bonus to use the repo item and not the actual Rx path. Finally, let's take it one step further and look at version 3 and how we can try to optimize it even more by not passing in the value or adding it to the method, but passing it in as an argument so you can use the same method multiple times over and over again. You don't have to rewrite these methods each and every time. So we're going to look at, we're going to create a new recording, API underscore v3, and a new code module. API v3. Okay, so now we're going to write some simple code. Actually, before I write the code, I need to create 2 methods. One method is just clicking an object, and another method will be to click and type, or just type even. We'll look at that in a little bit, but those are the only 2 recordings that I need. So this first one is going to take an argument. Okay, so we can pass in any of the standard data types. Ranorex has 2 data types it uses. An adapter is for actions. So anything that requires some type of event, a click, double click, selecting, typing, these are all actions. A repo item info is for collection. If you need to collect a value, attribute value is the object enabled? That's a true value. You want to collect it. What's the value of a text attribute? Any informational item you need to get from an object is this data type here. But we're going to focus on adapter. And we'll say, click this. I guess that's generic enough. Okay. And then we'll click create another user code. Okay, we'll call this, oh, I shouldn't have called it API version 3. Well, I'll rename it in a second. We'll call this one click and type. Okay. We'll just call this one click. Okay, so for the click and type, we're going to pass in an object and we're going to type. So in this case, they are the same object. The object I click on will also be the object I type. So I don't need to pass, well, but the second, I guess the second argument to this method would be the string that I'm passing in. So click arguments. We're going to add an adapter. We'll call this text box. And we'll add one more. Okay, by default, it'll pick string. I was clicking on this, but I hit the add button instead. And we'll call it just value, since I left it in lowercase the other one. Okay, perfect. Now that I have the two, I want in my click to just pass in the test database. And in my user code for click and go, I want to add first name. And if I want, I can copy this again, or if I want to add the action this way, it's now part of a library. Okay, now this library is local to this class. However, I can make a global collection that's available to the entire project. So once you write this method, you can use it elsewhere. This one is limited to this recording. I'll click and type. Okay, and then I'll put in last name. Okay. If I want, I can use the click next time to click on the gender or any of the menu items. I'll use this code here. Okay. If you like, you can also copy Control-C, Control-V, Control-V. This one will target my open. And then once I target it, I'll get the item of interest management. So let's write the code now. Just double click. And we have access to the two methods that we wrote right here, the click and type. This one is just going to be click this dot click. And this one is just going to be 2 lines of code. Text box dot click, and then text box dot press keys value. Now, of course, we'd have a report in each one of these also, but now you're saving yourself time. You don't have to recreate these actions over and over again with text. You don't have to type these actions. You can strictly just go to the version, this recording, copy paste this user code, and then just apply it the arguments. Okay. In this user code, if you look a little closely, you'll see that the text box is used twice, both to click and to press. Now, if we're testing the actual user interface and we're using the mouse and keyboard, we have to click into the text box in order to type. Otherwise, it just types in space, kind of like lost in space, but it types in space. However, if we're targeting the object itself directly, we can type directly into it. You don't have to click. So if you want, you could just comment that out really and just press keys directly. But we'll leave it open for now. Okay, so that's the 3 approaches to using code, starting at the very high level all the way down to the more granular level where we're now passing in arguments and really minimizing number of code lines that we have to write. But if I go back to test, remember I showed you test had a user code that we looked at. If I right click on it and say view code, okay, this is the actual code that Ranorex wrote behind the scenes, all the logs, the delays, and the actual action. This is read-only. I can't edit it, but I do have access to this code, and I have access by converting it into a user code class. Okay. Ranorex recording is built using a partial class. The top CS file is read-only. That's what Ranorex accesses and writes its code. However, we can overwrite what Ranorex does through the user code partial class, and this is read-write. To get Ranorex's code in here, all we have to do is just select, say, a group of objects, maybe from here to here. I need to check to make sure that the first name and last name are empty before I actually type into it. So I need to do some type of conditional, and this is where code really comes into play. Let Ranorex do all it does behind the scenes. We can then advance it through conditional statements if required. Okay. I selected all of those 4 actions, right-click, and I can convert each action into a method, like I did with API version 1, where I had 2 methods I used over and over again. I can do that, or I can convert or merge them all into one method. And if I need a return value, I can do that. I'll click it, and now you'll see that I clicked onto the tab, and this action now does 4 things. If I click on arguments, you can see, well, in this case, it just took 2 arguments. One was first name, one was last name. If I double click, here is the converted actions. Ranorex passed over its work into user code. If I go back to the CS file right here, you can see now this was the clicking on the tab, and then now merged user code method, which is what it took those 4 actions, and it's calling this partial class to do these actions. And all you have to do now is just do a test. If, let's say, if text info, which I think is the first name, if text info dot equals nothing, I guess that would make sense. And, and I was thinking something else like SQL. And text info 1 dot equals nothing, then go ahead and run these actions because the text boxes are blank. Else, do whatever needs to be done, or I guess I'll just write do something that clears out those text boxes, and then run those actions again. So this is where code really comes into play, not to have direct access to the API, but just really use anything that's conditional, a while statement. Maybe you want to do backend testing by interacting with the SQL database to see that a user was added and has it been added to the SQL table. So ideally, that's where code really comes into play. Now let's just quickly look at 2 fun examples. One example is scrolling. If you have an object you need to get to on a scrolling panel, and on your high resolution screen, it might only take 3 clicks to get to it. But if you play this back on a lower resolution screen, it may take about 4, 5, 6, 7 clicks. So how do you handle this click to automate the response so that it knows based on the resolution how many times it needs to click? Okay, we're going to do that with a new recording. And we'll call this recording, what should I call it? Find path. Find path is a good one. I'm going to use File Explorer to find a path. Okay. Now, before I do my code, I need to get some objects. What I'm going to do is, okay, it happened to open up in this size. What I want to do is, at the top, I want to continue clicking this drop-down button until I find Windows, the C file, the C directory. Then I'm going to double click it. I'm going to keep pressing this until I find x86, and then keep doing it again until I find Ranorex. Okay. And then I'll end. So now I'm going to automate this based on this window size. And if it changes the next time, we'll still be able to find those objects. Okay, so let's go ahead and collect these objects first. I'll open up SPY, track. Okay, I want that drop down. I'm going to drag it right into the repository. Okay, then we'll go back to SPY, and this time we're going to select these path names. Track, grab it. Okay, then we'll go back to SPY and grab this one, track. And then one more. Go back to SPY. And where is that little fella? There it is. Okay, got them all. So let me go and shrink these back to collapse it, collapse, and we'll go back and put this at this level here. Okay. Go back to SPY and add this Ranorex. Now we're going to create some code, and I'm going to click on here, user code, new code, and I'll call this find path. Okay, it doesn't like the name that you can't make the recording and the file name the same, or the method name the same. Find path, and it's going to take two actions or two objects. Okay, you're going to take an adapter, and we're going to call this the down button. And we're going to take another adapter, and we're going to call this not a info item, but an adapter. And we're going to call this path name, so we'll just call it PN. Okay. So my objects that I need to pass into it, if I go back here, the down button, and the first one is a C right there. Okay, perfect. I'm going to create, this time once I find the object, I could add it to this code if I want, but I'm going to go ahead and just do a double click. Okay, so let's write some code. We're going to go into double click on one. Okay, we're going to start by creating an integer, I, and we'll just call it, we'll make it 0 right now. And we're going to put it, create a while loop. And we're going to run this while loop until I is greater than 50. And then we're going to end. That way, if I can't find this folder, maybe it doesn't exist anymore, I won't be stuck in an infinite loop. It'll exit after 50, continue with the rest of the test. So while I is less than 50, go ahead and do something. The first thing we're going to do is just increment I, so we don't want to forget that. Okay. Once we increment it, we're going to click the button, and that's the down button that we created. Dot click. Okay. Now we're going to do a test. Does the path exist? So we're going to do an if statement. If path name, is it visible? Is it on the screen? Okay. If it is, what we want to do is two things. We want to click the down button one more time, only because it may be visible, but it may be right at that point where you only see half the text and not all of it. And Ranorex will say, well, it is visible. So let's click that down button one more time and make sure it's exposed. Okay. And then we're going to set I to 100. That way we can exit the loop. Now I could do path name dot double click and make sure that it clicks it in here as well. We could have this entire code run everything all at once, but I pulled out the double click just so we can see how we can mix match. Okay, we'll go back to find path. Okay, if anybody sees an error here, by all means, let us know. Oop, I already saw one. I don't know why I always press 1 for I. Happens a lot. I. Okay. Go back to find path. And now I'm going to copy these two lines and paste them twice. Okay. In line 3, I'm going to replace Windows C with program x86 and the double click as well, x86. Okay. And the last one, Ranorex and Ranorex. Okay. So let's give this a try and see how we were able to use the API to our advantage. Run recording. I think I have Ranorex in debug mode, so that's going to take a little bit longer. Okay, it should start up any second. Okay, and here we go. Got it. And now we're going to scroll down until we get to program x86. And now finally, we'll scroll down until we get to Ranorex Studio. So this will work on any size file explorer, but it's nice, fun code that you could use for your own projects. And there we have it. So the test ran. It would have been nice maybe if I took a screenshot along the way just to verify that we did get each of the objects handled correctly. Now that we have this, let's quickly just look at one more example. I'm going to create a new recording. Okay, we'll just call this web services. Okay, in web services, we'll create a new action or a new code action. Okay, we'll say, we'll call it ref sharp. So we're going to use the ref sharp API to write some code. Before I do that, I need to add that API to Ranorex Studio. And I can do that by selecting the references folder. Okay, if it's part of my repository, my global repository, global cache in Windows, I can add reference to it, or go out to NuGet and look for a public API. Okay, we'll go ahead and add it. And then once it's added, there we go. Click, and if you go down, you'll see I added ResSharp API for us now to work with. Okay, we're going to add a reference to it. And I'm just going to write some quick code. It's going to be, we're going to create a REST client. We'll just call it client. And that will be a new REST client. And I think we're going to target this website, http://api.zip. So we're going to reach out and get zip information. .us, close that, and then we'll do a REST request. Not an iREST request, just a REST request. There we go. Equals a new REST request. There we go, perfect. And we're gonna pass it US with an area code of 90210 and method.get using JSON. There we go, perfect. And then finally, we'll use the iREST response. Okay, that's the one. Response equals, and we're going to take our client and execute the request. Okay, and then finally, we'll get back the string from the response, and we have to convert it or connect it or get the content and then convert it to string. And then at the end, we're going to report. .info is just informational that we're going to report out. Value. And that should be it. So let's run this and see if we get information back from 90210. You can also run directly from the code. You don't have to run from the recording each time. And here's the debug. I should have I clicked that to disable it. Oops. Oh, it was with the, did I type in method correctly? METHO get, but it looks like, here it is again. I always seem to do this. There we go. That'll give me time to undo this. Let's build it. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and run the test. Okay, perfect. And we got our results back for 90210, United States, Beverly Hills, with longitude and latitude. Okay, so that is our webinar for Ranorex API. I hope this helps. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to answer those. All right, thank you. All right, guys, take it away. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks, Mubin. Let's see, we've been answering a lot of questions in the chat, so hopefully you guys have been getting some answers. If you have any additional questions, just go ahead and email our support, or you can also hit us up on our forum. We'd like to thank you for joining us today, and look forward to our next webinar, and we thank you for your attendance today. Thanks so much.